in the evening hours and nighttime hours, it takes very little light in order to wake up your brain and body and to disrupt your circadian clock and disrupt your sleep.
Dr. Andrew Huberman, a pretty well-known neuroscientist, I'd say, shares exciting new sleep research that'll change the way that we think about rest. He discusses the science of sleep, how it affects our daily lives, and what we can do to improve it for better health and performance. Dr. Huberman introduces new ideas and new methods that will completely change how we see and deal with sleep, leading us towards a brighter, more rested future. By understanding it and applying these new insights, we can make the most out of our sleep and enjoy the benefits that brings.
Yeah, I'm not encouraging people to take anything, but there's a very, very famous Nobel Prize-winning neuroscientist who I went to his office to visit him in New York, and he chewed 7 pieces of Nicorette during that half-hour meeting. And I was like, what is going on here? And he said, well, first of all, it increases plasticity. And second of all, he has the belief, and this is not a clinical study, but he thinks that it can also hold off certain forms of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. Well, creatives, when smoking became less in vogue, I think creatives really suffered because it's very clear that, so Nicorette is nicotine, and the acetylcholine binds to the nicotinic receptor. So when you take nicotine in cigarette form or in Nicorette form, you're actually increasing the release of the action of acetylcholine in the brain.
Yeah, I don't smoke cigarettes, but I have. And the only time I have is before shows, because I have friends that are comedians that would smoke, and I'd be like, give me one of them things. Let me see what's going on. And I smoked, and I was like, whoa, dude, you get high off these things. This is crazy, particularly if you don't smoke cigarettes. You get this really weird high.
Well, your receptors have never seen that level of nicotine before, and they like that.
It's exciting.
And so for those moments, your acetylcholine is like a spotlight. It brings your vision literally into this more kind of portrait mode where you can see more like a narrow window of what's going on. There are behavioral ways to access this too. Before a fight, if somebody's really ramped up, their world is they're not seeing everything. They're probably, I've never done the walk, of course, but probably walking out to the octagon, they're not seeing all the color of the hat of the woman in the corner. They're not relaxed, they're hyped up.
Right.
But that's a trigger for plasticity because the brain needs some way to cue this plasticity process to let itself know, because it's a self-learning organ, let itself know that something's really different. That's adrenaline. Something's changed. Then there's focus, what's changed? And having acetylcholine and noradrenaline up, that sets the plasticity trigger. However, that doesn't guarantee that those synapses are going to change. It does not mean that you're necessarily going to learn.
Oh, no.
What guarantees that process will be converted into literally the change in the connections between neurons, sometimes new neurons, but mostly the change in the strength of the connection, so that eventually you don't have to do duration path outcome, you can just be reflexive about it, is states of deep sleep and any state where you're not doing duration path outcome. A lot of the changes in these brain structures occurs after learning during deep sleep, in particular slow wave sleep. But it also occurs during periods of naps and shallow sleep, or even just periods where people deliberately decompress, where they're not focusing on any one thing in particular. So if we were gonna kind of operationalize this process, it would be focus intensely, have an intense period of urgency, and then access the deepest rest you can where you're not thinking about anything, where space and time becomes very fluid.
So stress in that case, post-exercise or learning session would actually hinder your ability to grow and get better.
Absolutely. And elite performers like elite military, elite athletes, I'm sure you're familiar with this, they understand that the ability to toggle back and forth between these high alert, high attentional states and deep rest is not just the key to performing what you can already do, it's also the ability to get better over time.
Get ready for a new perspective on sleep as Dr. Andrew Huberman delves into its fascinating world. In this engaging talk, he uncovers the latest scientific discoveries about sleep's important role in our overall well-being and our overall success. Dr. Huberman shares powerful strategies and easy-to-follow tips for enhancing sleep quality, helping you make the most out of this essential part of our lives. Don't miss the chance to learn about the more amazing powers of sleep and how you can harness it for a healthier, happier life.
There are a number of things that you're going to want to do, and there are a number of things that you are going to want to avoid doing in order to optimize your sleep. First of all, you're going to want to avoid bright artificial lights of any color. Yes, of any color. We haven't talked a lot about blue blockers, lenses that block blue wavelengths or short wavelengths of light. I don't have anything against blue blockers. In fact, many people find that blue blockers provide them some relief from headache and some eye strain if they wear blue blockers throughout the day and certainly at night, but you don't need them. And even if you do wear them, you will find that if lights are very bright, doesn't matter if it's a blue light, a yellow light, or a red light, those bright lights will wake up your brain and body. They will activate the same mechanisms that were activated early in the day by sunlight. However, the diabolical twist in the way that your brain and body respond to light is that early in the day, in the morning hours, you need a lot of bright light, ideally from sunlight, to be very alert and to wake up. But in the evening hours and nighttime hours, it takes very little light, very few photons, in order to wake up your brain and body and to disrupt your circadian clock and disrupt your sleep. So what that means is that once the sun goes down, you would be wise to try and dim the lights in your indoor environment most days, right? I realize some nights you're going to throw a party and have people over. You might not want to dim the lights. Some nights you're going to go out. You might view a lot of bright lights. But most nights of your life, you're going to want to dim the lights in your internal environment. And ideally, the lights that you do use, you would place low in that physical environment. So you would try and not use overhead lights, but rather rely on desk lamps or lights even placed low to the floor, even on the floor. If you are going to use light at night, and most people do, I would encourage you to use as little artificial light as is required to carry out the activities you need to require safely. That could be studying, in which case you might need a little bit more light in order to read or study. If you're watching a television show or you're watching something on your computer, dim that screen way, way down, as dim as possible, while still, of course, being able to view what you need to view. Even better, I should say, ideally, you would use candlelight and or moonlight. Now, some nights the moon is really bright and you actually can use moonlight to go about your usual activities. Moonlight might seem very, very bright, but actually moonlight is fairly low light intensity. And candlelight, which can also seem very bright, actually is very low light intensity. If you're sitting across a table with some candlelight there, and it's a really bright candle, chances are it's only about 3 to 10 lux, which is very, very little light energy compared to, say, an artificial desk lamp or an overhead light, which is going to be in the area of anywhere from 100 to 1,000 lux. So candlelight is fine. Of course, be cautious with open flame, but candlelight is fine. Moonlight is fine. Dimming artificial lights is fine, provided they're dimmed way, way down. And again, try and avoid using overhead artificial lights. The absolute worst lights are going to be overhead fluorescent lights of the sort that you would have in the supermarket, or that you would see at a gas station or something of that sort. Viewing bright light in the late evening hours and nighttime hours is really not good for your sleep quality and your ability to fall and stay asleep. For most people, a simple rule of thumb is going to be avoid bright artificial lights of all colors, and in particular, overhead bright artificial lights between the hours of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m. That's right, between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., avoid those bright artificial lights as much as possible. Use only as much light as is absolutely necessary in order to carry out the routines and activities you need to carry out safely. I should mention that the reason overhead lights are problematic is the same reason why sunlight is so great early in the day, which is that the cells, that is the neurons that can wake up your brain and body through activation of the circadian clock, reside mainly in the bottom half or 2/3 of your neural retina. And the way the optics of your eyes work is that the cells on the bottom half of your eye view the upper visual field. So this is a beautiful adaptive mechanism that allows these cells to respond to overhead light from sunlight in the early part of the day and throughout the day. But in the evening, if you have bright artificial lights on and those bright artificial lights are overhead lights, it's going to more closely mimic what sunlight does in the evening time. And that turns out to be a bad thing if your goal is to eventually go to sleep. So again, do like the Scandinavians do. Use lights that are set low in the room at night. And if you really want to optimize your sleep-wake cycles, I suppose you could also do the opposite throughout the day. You could really emphasize the use of bright artificial lights and sunlight that comes from above. And of course, sunlight always comes from above. But if you're working in a given, office environment and, it's 2 p.m. or 3 p.m. and you want to be as awake as possible, really crank up the overhead lights. And then in the evening, which is this critical period 3 that we're referring to, really try and dim those lights or have them off, or just rely on candlelight or moonlight from the hours of about 10 p.m. until 4 a.m. dim the lights, turn them way, way down. It will serve you well. It will make it much easier for you to get sleepy and stay sleepy and fall asleep and stay asleep throughout the night.
Join an interesting conversation with Dr. Andrew Huberman, who reveals valuable information about sleep and its strong effects on our minds and our bodies. He shares the newest research findings and easy-to-use tips, encouraging us to think again about our sleep habits and take advantage of a good night's rest. Be a part of this captivating discussion and change the way that you approach sleep for a healthier, more productive life. After watching the video, you're never going to see sleep in the same light again, mostly because you're sleeping and there is no light. But really though, there's so much to learn about the connection between sleep and a healthier mind and body.
If, for instance, you're somebody who falls asleep just fine, but wakes up in the middle of the night, around 2 or 3 a.m., or any time for that matter, and has trouble falling back asleep, there are 2 categories of supplements that you might want to consider. The first is myo-inositol, typically taken as 900 milligrams of myo-inositol. Myo-inositol can help shorten the amount of time that it takes to fall back asleep if you wake up in the middle of the night. Myo-inositol has other beneficial uses as well for mood, etc. Other people who wake up in the middle of the night will wake up because their dreams are very intense, or they were having dreams that were so vivid that suddenly they were jolted from their dreams. Those people would do well to avoid certain supplements. So in a moment, I'll talk about the value of a supplement called theanine for falling asleep. But theanine, which typically is taken in dosages anywhere from 100 milligrams to 400 milligrams, theanine can be great for many people, but for people who have excessively vivid dreams, those excessively vivid dreams can lead to immediate waking and sometimes a little bit of anxiety upon waking in the middle of the night. So some people who wake up in the middle of the night, so jolted mentally and physically out of sleep because of their intense dreams, would do well to avoid theanine supplementation. It's something that I think a lot of nighttime, middle of the night wakers might be familiar with and would want to take into consideration. Now, for those of you that are not waking up in the middle of the night or not having excessively vivid dreams, but are having trouble falling asleep, 2 supplements in particular have been shown to be effective for shortening the transition time to sleep and allowing people to ease into sleep more readily. And those are magnesium threonate, which is interchangeable with magnesium bisglycinate. Magnesium bisglycinate and magnesium threonate both have transporter systems that allow them to readily cross the blood-brain barrier, and they lead to a mild form of drowsiness. Mild in the sense that it's not going to prevent you from operating a motor vehicle or kind of any conditions under emergency that might arise in the middle of the night. Or if they did arise during the middle of the night, you'd still be able to function, so it's not like a sleeping pill. But people who take those often find that their transition time into sleep is much faster and their sleep is also much deeper. Incidentally, those supplements are also thought to be useful for cognitive support and neuroprotection, although there's less data on that. And then the other supplement is apigenin. Apigenin, which is a derivative of chamomile, also acts as a bit of a anxiety-lowering compound, which is essential prior to sleep for people to essentially turn off their thinking or to be able to reduce the amount of ruminating and problem-solving and future anticipation that they're doing, which is a requirement for falling asleep. So what's the rational approach to supplementing in a way that allows you to fall asleep more quickly and stay asleep? Well, would you immediately take magnesium threonate and apigenin together? Well, that depends. If you have the budget and you just simply want to fall asleep quicker and you don't care which of those 2 ingredients is going to be more effective for you, well, then you could try one, for instance, magnesium threonate, and try it for perhaps a week and see how that affects your latency to sleep time, that is how quickly you fall asleep. Or you could try apigenin in the first week, or you could combine them both, or you could try magnesium threonate for a week, then switch to only apigenin for a week and evaluate which one works better for you. If neither works for you, I do recommend trying the combination together. Again, this is just the way that any scientist would design an experiment to try and understand which variables, that is, which ingredients are most effective for the result that you want, as opposed to just lumping them together and taking them. Now, I think 1 week's time of taking something, provided it doesn't induce any negative effects, then I think you want to try a single ingredient formulation for about a week while not varying anything else, not changing anything else in your overall protocols of nutrition or supplementation. It's impossible to clamp everything perfectly from week to week, but don't change anything else dramatically and just add that supplement for a given week, see how it benefits your sleep. maybe add in a second supplement if you like, or rather swap and try a different supplement for a week and then see what works best and see if the combination works even better.